Okay, so first tell us what we're going to listen to.
This is a 1923 recording of a klezmer piece. It's called Heiser Bulgar. Spirited Bulgar is the translation, and it was Natalia Brandywine, and it was recorded on a Victor label.
This is The Book of Life, a show about Jewish kidlit, mostly. I'm Heidi Rabinowitz, and I am so excited to have reached the 20-year anniversary of the Book of Life podcast. You just heard a clip from August 2007, recorded at the Judaica Sound Archives at Florida Atlantic University, but the show goes back further than that. My very first episode aired in December 2005, just a year after the word podcast was coined. You can read about the whole evolution of the show on my Substack in an essay entitled Podcasting Since the Dawn of Time, which I'll link to in the show notes. But just to quote briefly from that essay, during the tenure of the Book of Life, I've lived in 7 different houses, gotten divorced and remarried, and moved from Florida to Massachusetts and back to Florida again. My life changes, but my podcast is a constant because there are always more authors I want to meet and more books I want to tell you about. Now, to celebrate, there are 20th anniversary treats waiting for you in today's show notes, like a miniature zine about the podcast that you can print and fold. It's perfect for learning more or for passing along to friends who might like the show. And I've created Book of Life 20th anniversary merch, like mugs and t-shirts, and purchases benefit the Association of Jewish Libraries, so get yourself a Hanukkah gift. Okay, now what I've got for you today is a super deluxe retrospective episode with short clips from every year of the podcast. We'll start with this anniversary year, 2025, and then move back through time to 2005. I picked clips that I thought were funny or meaningful or were good snapshots of their time. Every guest I've ever had has been magnificent, and it was really hard to choose from among them. If I didn't pick your favorites, I'm sorry, but don't worry, every single episode is still available at bookoflifepodcast.com or in your podcast app, ready for you to explore. I've been doing this podcast for 20 years because I believe in the power of books in general, and Jewish kidlit in particular, to change the world, to make Jewish readers feel seen and to make friends out of readers from other backgrounds. Please help me spread the joy of Jewish books on social media and in real life. Word of mouth is the very best way for the show to find new listeners, so please don't hesitate to share. And if you'd like to say happy anniversary or tell me what you think of the show, I would truly love to hear from you at bookoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Now let's travel through time from 2025 back to 2005. We will hear one or more clips from each year of the Book of Life's existence. We've even got an intermission, so you can get yourself a snack. You ready? Here we go. Let's start with this year, 2025. In February, I spoke with Josh Levy about his middle grade novel, Finn and Ezra's Bar Mitzvah Time Loop. I figured a time travel book would be a good way to kick off our own trip back through the years.
Why are there so many Jewish time stories? It's Russian Doll, the canonical biblical Groundhog Day text. I don't necessarily think of it as a Jewish story, but Hal Ramis, who directed it and co-wrote it, Jewish. Palm Springs, which I love, Andy Samberg. Dara Horn's Eternal Life is one of my all-time favorite novels, and as is included in Finn and Ezra, Rabbi Akiva, and that crazy story, literally in the Talmud, tells a time travel tale. So it's everywhere. And the question is, why do we tell these time travel adjacent stories? My theory is, in the water of who we are is being the heirs to a very, very long tradition, right? Like a people with a very long history. And maybe when you live with time Like, we've lived with time. You wrestle with it and it knocks you down and you overcome it, right? It becomes a kind of character in the texture of your existence that can be cruel and mischievous and provide grace. That is my treatise response to your question that I have been burning to talk to you about. And I didn't know you would give me the question, but I'm so happy you did.
I love that. That was like a little TED Talk right there.
Amazing.
I mostly avoid Holocaust books, but there were 2 recent books too good to ignore. Since the authors are friends, I interviewed them together in July 2024. Here's Adam Gidwitz talking about his middle grade fantasy Max and the House of Spies, chatting with his friend Steve Schenken, author of Impossible Escape, which is YA nonfiction. They're each great, but together they were a true delight.
I wonder, Adam, would you have made a good spy? I mean, would you want to be Max?
When I was a kid, I would lie in bed at night and imagine, constantly, what I would have done if I were in the Holocaust. I always came to the conclusion I would have died. They would have got me. I had all sorts of other fantasies. I constantly fantasized about becoming an NBA superstar, which is clearly was never in the cards for me. And yet, the one fantasy that I couldn't even entertain was having actually escaped and survived the Holocaust. And likewise, I think being a spy, I would immediately just appeal to someone's humanity and be like, I'm going to tell you everything. I'm going to tell you the truth. Please be nice. Which, of course, would not work. So, I couldn't. Could you? Could you have done any of the things Rudy did?
Oh, Rudy, I was thinking of Max. But, well, the funny
sure,
thing is,
either way.
My mother, she would tell me, it's embarrassing to say, but her biggest line for me was, don't be sneaky.
Really?
And at the time, I thought, well, why not? It allows you to get away with stuff. But her point was that it was a very despicable trait. But the fact that you're surprised by that...
I'm shocked.
...indicates to me maybe I would be a good spy because I'm naturally sneaky. And people don't suspect me of being that way.
I love this. I've never suspected it. You do appear to be a very mild-mannered, kind, and forthright person. I mean, literally, your whole job is only telling the truth, right?
That's true. Yeah, it's a good cover.
It's a great cover.
But...
In May 2024, my guest was Ruth Behar, a Cuban Jewish author who is half Sephardic, half Ashkenazi. Her middle grade novel, Across So Many Seas, is based on her Sephardic heritage. I chose this clip because I am a sucker for authors who burst into song.
En la mar hay una torre, en la torre una ventana, en la ventana una isla, que a los marineros llama. Terrible. I'm not a singer.
No, that's great. I was going to ask you to sing, so I'm so happy that you volunteered without me having to beg.
So that song, I decided to make that the key song that comes in and out of the story. In the sea, there's a tower. En la mar hay una torre. In the tower there, in the sea there is a tower. I don't know it in English. En la mar hay una torre, en la torre una ventana. In the tower there's a window. At the window, una hija, a daughter, who sings to the sailor. So the idea of this young girl caught in a tower in the middle of the sea, is she being punished, or has she just wanted her freedom and gone off on her own, but she's trapped in the ocean. She's calling to the sailors to release her. We don't know exactly. It's like a fable. And I was just very drawn to that song. I decided that that would be the song that would resonate through the whole story because they're constantly going from sea to sea.
April in April. In April 2024, I spoke with April Powers, Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Project Shema. I think this clip really represents the year 2024 with the timely topics of increasing anti-Semitism and of DEI.
I am a descendant of survivors of chattel slavery here in the US and Jews who fled pogroms in Eastern Europe, which means I'm bluish or black and Jewish. My sons are Hebrews, and my Jewish grandparents don't have a single white identified great grandchild. They have Jutinos, Latinos who are Jewish. We have LGBTQIA2P plus in my family, disability, neuroatypicality. We've had poverty, homelessness, drug addiction, substance abuse. Those last four being on the white presenting Jewish side of my family. That, along with my Jewish values of tikkun olam, brought me into working in DEI because I also speak a few languages, have lived in different parts of the world, and I've been insulted by all my people about all my people and in multiple languages. I've been doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work for most of my career, including having been the global head of DEI for the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, where I experienced extreme online anti-Semitism. It was very scary for me and my family. I realized that I hadn't adequately folded anti-Semitism education or countering anti-Semitism appropriately into my own DEI practice. So I make a point of doing that now through Project Shema.
In 2023, I had an especially diverse array of guests. This clip is from November 2023, when I spoke with Emily Bowen Cohen, a Jewish member of the Muskogee Nation, who joined me to talk about her graphic novel, Two Tribes.
I think I started off this process a little bit angry with the Jewish community, like a little bit upset that I had to write this book in a way. I just felt I had to do a lot of explanation about how I could be Native American and Jewish. This is something that makes me feel like I'm not really part of the mishpacha. I think reconnecting to what I love about being Jewish and what I feel is beautiful about the learning. For Mia's sake, she's got to find what's beautiful about it too. So I kind of had to take that journey with Mia and just sort of get back to the things that I really love about it. I couldn't write if I didn't believe it. So it was really nice to feel like, oh, I believe this. I want Mia to feel good about both sides of her identity. So I had to too, which was good.
Here's a clip from E-Train, the amazing teen literacy advocate who is also Jewish. I've always felt bad that his episode was posted only 5 days before October 7th, so it didn't get the attention it deserved. In just this tiny snippet, you'll hear how delightful he is.
My name is E-Train. I'm 12 years old. I'm going to have my bar mitzvah in January. I'm a literacy advocate, podcast host, and author interviewer. I've learned a lot about my heritage and who I am through Jewish Kidlit. So I love sharing Jewish books and connecting with Jewish authors. They're just the kindest people in the world. It's just so important to me to spread the word about Jewish books, and not just in Jewish Heritage Month. And I say this about LGBTQ plus books and books with Black representation, all kinds of representation. We shouldn't just talk about these stories in one specific month. We should be talking about them all year round. I love spreading my love of stories and inspiring kids to read, and being a literacy advocate, it's one of my passions in life. And I'm going to continue to spread book love and book joy as much as possible, worldwide, universe-wide, multiverse-wide. I could be like Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse. I'm E-Train Morales.
I love it.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening.
Sticking with 2023, here's my September guest, Richard Ho, a Chinese-American Jew by choice. He and his illustrator, Lynn Scurfield, joined me to talk about their picture book, Two New Years.
I'm a Jew by choice, so I converted in my 20s. So everything that I did was an intentional choice to take on Jewish practices and Jewish beliefs in addition to my Chinese upbringing. With my kids, they didn't have that choice. They were born Jewish, and this duality for them is perfectly natural. At some point, the idea for this book was a little bit more broad. It was like different life events and different holidays throughout the year that are sort of paralleled between Chinese and Jewish culture. And then I realized quickly that that's not a picture book. That's like an encyclopedia. Like that's just like that would have been way too broad. So narrowing it down to the celebration of the New Year is something that's so universal. looking back on the past year and looking forward to the next year. And so many of the things that I found within Rosh Hashanah and the Jewish idea of a new year were so familiar because there were a lot of parallels to Chinese traditions and Chinese customs and practices that I grew up familiar with. So to me, it was a natural choice to craft a book out of this topic.
One more from 2023, the March episode. We've been catching up with Sephardic representation in Kidlit, but we are still behind on Mizrahi rep. Sarah Sassoon is helping to change that. She's an Australian Jew of Iraqi descent, and she based her picture book, Shoham's Bangle, on her own family history.
Operation Ezra Nehemiah was an amazing airlift created by the Mossad and Israel to get the Iraqi Jews out. I think it was one of the biggest airlifts in history. Jews from Iraq considered themselves Babylonian Jews all the way back from the Judean exile in 586 BC with the destruction of the first temple. And a lot of our customs, a lot of our food can be traced back to the Talmud, which was developed in Babylon. My grandmother always said how beautiful life was in Baghdad, which is why I actually began with my question in my research. So why did they leave? If the Tigris River was such a wonderful place where Muslims, Christians, and Jews met at the coffee shops, only the men, obviously. My grandmother described how she used to swap bread with her Muslim neighbor. They really had very real, very good relationships. A third of Baghdad was Jewish in 1917. They were integral to the society. Just like American Jews are integral to American society, Baghdadian Jews saw themselves as Iraqis. And the Jews were very much part of the Senate. They were part of commerce. They were part of every aspect of a modern country emerging in the Middle East. That's where the Jews were. They were very proud of their position. So why did they have to leave was always my question.
As I mentioned, Jewish children's literature is finally starting to reflect the Sephardic experience. Here's Bridget Hodder and Sarah Arowesti from December 2022 in an episode called It's Always a Party with a Sephardi.
There's so much attention given to hatred. And I think Sarah and I both, in representing the Sephardim, we want to bring attention to love and to joy and to what we can offer each other from our differences instead of taking our differences and making them walls. And that's why I always like to wish people paths of milk and honey, which is our traditional Sephardic wish. It's often wished at weddings, but I think it's worth wishing it all the time. Caminos de leche y miel.
So I'll piggyback on that with a Ladino proverb. Todos los dedos de la mano no son unos. All the fingers of the hand are not the same. Which I just think is so beautiful because we're all part of the same hand. And I always point out to my audiences that Sephardic culture is Jewish culture. You can't separate us. We're not the other. Like, we are all part of this thing called Judaism. And I think too often we are separated. No, like, we are part of the same hand.
So let's all work together. Yep. Oh, yeah.
The Very Best Sukkah by Shoshana Nambi is a beautiful rarity, a story about the Abba Yudaya Jews of Uganda written by a member of that very community. Plus, it's a great Sukkot story. Best of all, Shoshana was one of those authors who burst into song. Here's a clip from her October 2022 interview.
I will sing the Hine Matov because it's both in Hebrew and it's in English, and it's one of the songs that we use to sing when we come together. It's the song that we sang when we were seated in somebody's sukkah. It's the song that was sung in the book by all the families and the community. Hinema tovu umanayim shevet achim gam yachad אחים גם יחד. לבה וקוליו קולונג'י וקוסניוסה. אבולו גנדה או קוטולה. לבה וקוליו קולונג'י וקוסניוסה. Abalu ganda o kutula. So these songs are usually sung in harmony, and there's so many people. It's just joyous and, wonderful way of celebrating.
Over the 20 years I've been podcasting, queer Jewish literature has really blossomed. One of the most unusual examples of that is the Yiddish translation of You Be You, the Kid's Guide to Gender, Sexuality, and Family. Here's the author, Jonathan Bramfman, and the translator, Lily Rosen, from June 2022.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jonathan Bramfman. I'm a visiting assistant professor of Jewish Studies at Cornell and the author of the book You Be You, the Kid's Guide to Gender, Sexuality, and Family.
Hi, I'm Lily Rosen. I'm an actor and a writer, and I translated You Be You into Yiddish. Sag getrei sich allein, des Kinds Wegweiser zu mein Geschlecht im Mischbuche.
We'll be joining you soon on the Book of Life podcast, and we'd like to dedicate this episode to Jewish LGBTQ folks everywhere on the spectrum, from ultra-Orthodox to unaffiliated.
When John first reached out to me to translate this, I had not come out yet as trans, or queer for that matter. I always felt very strongly about the issues, and although I knew I was some flavor of queer, because I wasn't really out to myself as trans, it was hard for me to really quantify that. And so I really considered myself an ally more than a member of the LGBTQ community when I first agreed to take the project on. And then, due to various factors, one of which was the actual project, I experienced this awakening in which I realized that I was actually writing this for myself, translating this for myself. So, as far as I'm concerned, I am the intended audience, or people like me. When I think about how I hope this has an impact, I think about myself at 12 or 13 when I was struggling with puberty and struggling with my body and experiencing all kinds of dysphoria. I wish I had this book then. And I wish I understood these things then. Hopefully this helps somebody else. It helps prevent somebody else from struggling for so long with their identity.
I had to include this clip from June 2022 because censorship is such a timely topic. Deborah Caldwell Stone, the director of the American Library Association's Office for Intellectual Freedom, spoke about the Unite Against Book Bans campaign.
One thing that is bothering me is the idea that places librarians and educators in opposition to parents, that librarians and educators are actively trying to tear children and students away from their parents. And we both know that that's the most poisonous disinformation that's out there. We should always fight against that falsehood and recognize that it's there simply to tear us apart and divide us rather than allowing us to come together to work on the issue together.
In my many years as a librarian, anytime somebody says, "Oh, what do you do?" and you say librarian, and especially if you say children's librarian, the warm fuzzies come out. Everybody loves librarians. Everybody loves children's books. And so the idea that that is a demographic that's being vilified is just completely shocking and seems to me highly cynical because it's unnatural to feel that way about librarians.
Absolutely. But there is some good news. One of the strongest numbers to come out of the polling was that 91% of the people polled, no matter what their political persuasion, 91% believe in the work of the librarians and they approve of the work their library is doing. They support their libraries. They think libraries are a force for good in their community. So we have to hold tight to that and remember that what we're hearing from is a vocal minority and not the prevailing sentiment in our country today.
Here's the one that got away. In August 2021, I was a guest on a great podcast called Star Trek and the Jews. I really wanted to have the hosts, Josh Zell and Hava Friedman, on the Book of Life, but to my great disappointment, their show went on hiatus at the end of that year and hasn't yet returned. Here's a clip from Star Trek and the Jews so you can imagine what might have been.
Hello, and welcome to Star Trek and the Jews, the monthly podcast that uses Star Trek to boldly explore the worlds of Jews and Judaism. Josh will be discussing Captain David Gold, lead character of the Starfleet Corps of Engineers ebook series, and arguably the most prominent Jewish character in Trek, with librarian and podcaster Heidi Rabinowitz.
So we read Creative Coupling. David Gold's granddaughter is getting married to the son of the Klingon ambassador. What were your first impressions of this story and the Jewish representation in it?
First of all, I just want to say that I think that the Klingons are basically Jewish.
Yes.
So the Klingons are really big on tradition, and they're really big on ritual, and they speak this guttural language. Which actually I just watched an interview with, I forget his name now, but the guy who invented the Klingon language.
Oh,
who is
Mark
Jewish.
Okrand, yeah.
Yes. And who said that he was trying specifically to not make it sound too much like Yiddish, and he kept getting complaints that it sounded just like Yiddish. I just watched, because of your Hebrew school homework, I've been trying to do my homework, and so I just watched recently You Are Cordially Invited.
Yeah.
So I would also say that Klingons tend to discourage others from joining the tribe, at least at first, and so that also seems kind of Jewish. So the idea of combining Klingons and Jews is just, it makes perfect sense. I also wanted to say that I liked how they pointed out that because the Klingon gods are dead, that this wedding doesn't violate any commandment, the commandment of you shall have no other god,
right.
Because they don't.
Yes, they killed them all.
Yeah, so I thought that was a really excellent point to make in terms of how this combination is going to work. And I like the batleths around the chuppah. I just thought, there were some really fun touches like that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with your point that, like, the Klingon wedding already has some very Jewy vibes to it. Smashing those swords into each other doesn't seem quite so far from stomping on the glass.
In March 2021, a year into the COVID-19 pandemic, when we were all getting our first vaccinations, I was glad to talk to Linda Elovitz-Marshall about her picture book, The Polio Pioneer, a biography of Jonas Salk.
The polio pioneer phrase is used in two different ways. We used it as the title for the book because Jonas Salk was groundbreaking in discovering the vaccine. The phrase polio pioneer also applied to the 2 million children who lined up and got their shots. And every child who got a shot got a little button that he or she could wear, and it said, "I'm a polio pioneer." Kids were very proud to be participating in the study and to be vaccinated, much the way we are now. What a great thing it is these days to be vaccinated. In our emails back and forth prior to this, you'd mentioned if there was some sort of tikkun olam or teaching that I might want to share.
Yes, that was actually my very next question for you. So please do share with us, what action would you like to invite listeners to take to help heal the world?
So in the Musar study group that I'm in, we are reading the book Everyday Holy Day by Alan Marinas. They're very, very short segments. I wanted to share one because it spoke to me with Passover and Easter coming when we talk about this season of rebirth, even here in the Northeast. It's amazing. It happens every year at Passover time. Little chives are popping up in my lawn. And, instead of thinking them as weeds, they're signs of spring. They're the bitter herb, and they're coming up right in my lawn. It just gives me great joy to see them. And this week we're talking about joy, and I'd like to read a section. One day, people noticed Rabbi Nosson Tzvi Finkel, who lived from 1849 to 1927, who was called the Altar of Slobodka, enjoying a private banquet. What was the occasion? He had been told that a man in a far-off land, whom he did not know, had won a great prize. So the altar was full of joy for him, and so he made himself a party. The beauty of being joyful for someone else is so special. I mean, when we can celebrate the goodness that happens to somebody else, that's one of the ways we're absolutely our best selves. We can really kvel for someone else. Right now, there are things to be joyful about as we look forward. It's funny, my grandchildren were here last week for a Shabbat dinner. I was joyful because I'd been vaccinated and I could hold and cuddle them. And I've been making the rounds, seeing my grandchildren and holding them. And I have to tell you, these hugs are the most joyful ever. Absolutely delicious, real IRL, in real life hugs. Talk about joy.
I am so proud that my friend Susan Kucel won the 2022 Sydney Taylor Book Award for her debut picture book, The Passover Guest, illustrated by Sean Rubin. I had both of them on the show when the book was new in March 2021. Here's a clip from Sean.
I think a lot of illustrators work like this, but when I'm reading a manuscript, you'll start counting the things that appear in the text that you want to draw or that you would like to draw. Sometimes it's a perfectly fine manuscript, but you could get many pages in and be thinking, I don't really want to draw any of this stuff. It's somebody else will, but this is not something that really makes me excited to draw. With The Passover Guest, I basically wanted to draw things started on the first page, even if it was just a bunch of people in trench coats and sort of slouch hats. I like trench coats and slouch hats and fedoras, and I wasn't as up on trees at the time. I actually struggled through trees for a couple of titles. I think I've got a lot better, and that's because I had to do all those cherry blossoms. I had to develop a sort of a new technique for handling it, and the next book I'm doing is actually quite a lot of tree illustration in it. It was really just reading the manuscript and saying, okay, I want to draw this, I want to draw this, I want to draw this, I want to draw this. And then I got to the page with all the food, and the opportunity to draw a Seder feast was a lot of fun. Couldn't not do it.
It's really fun pairing up authors whose books have something in common. This worked very well in October 2020 when my two guests really hit it off. They were Joanne Levy, author of Fish Out of Water, and Evan Wolkenstein, author of Turtle Boy. Both books are middle-grade novels about Jewish boys combating toxic masculinity.
I'm so happy that you're making friends because I asked you both to join me at the same time. Because when I read these books that have so many similarities, I wondered what questions you might have for each other.
Awesome. Okay, my question for you, Joanne, is what is one personal thing that you learned from going through the bat mitzvah process? It's not like you wake up one day and you're grown up. And I think that the realization that that's not the way it is, and that grown-ups even don't always feel like grown-ups. I want to talk about the audio. I got the audiobook. I didn't realize when I ordered it that you narrated it yourself. And I thought that that was an extra bonus because hearing how your characters sound in your head isn't something that we normally get when we read a book. And also hearing the Hebrew and the drumming parts, it just gave it an extra oomph.
I fell in love with audiobooks as their own form of book. And I started to discover that there were audiobooks that I loved and I felt passionate about how they were voiced. The interesting thing is the voices of the characters as you hear them is not how I thought they would sound.
Oh.
I had an amazing director, Lisa Watstein. you commented on the Hebrew and the drumming. I really had in my mind like ba-ba-dum, ba-ba-dum, boom, 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 for the Kaddish. And I just dreamt about what it would feel like to say that into a big microphone in a recording booth. But what I didn't know would be that I would be crying while I did it. And you can hear my voice in some of the scenes. You can hear me choke up a little. While I was reading in tears and I'm like starting to choke up, she would be like, bring it back. She'd be saying it while I was talking, bring it back, bring it down, keep going, keep going. And I would just keep reading. It was like she was like holding my hand. I'm actually feeling choked up while I'm talking about this. It was like she was holding my hand on a tightrope. And that's how I got safely to the other side, but also created something that a listener would be able to hear and not feel overwhelmed by my emotion. And it was very powerful, very exhausting, and a lot like Yom Kippur. When it was over, I was drained and I gave it everything I had. And I'm so glad that you got to hear it. Thank you for listening to it.
Gail Carson Levine is not only the famous author of Ella Enchanted, she also writes occasional books based on her own family's Sephardic history. I was excited to have her on the show in May 2020 to talk about her middle grade historical novel about the Spanish Inquisition called A Ceiling Made of Eggshells.
200 years earlier, in Spain, and before that, was the golden age of Hebrew poetry and Jewish poetry and also Arabic poetry. I used the Penguin Book of Hebrew Verse for the poems that are in A Ceiling Made of Eggshells. And I am also a poet. So I studied poetry. I have a poetry collection for adults. So I read about the poems, and the translations in that book are in prose. So I adapted some of them and turned them back into poetry and looked at some of the techniques that were used at the time in those poems and used some of them. There's an acrostic, there are rhyme schemes that I used. So I'd like to point that out because I love poetry and I loved putting them in.
The Book of Life is a show about kidlit, but it's for grown-ups. Once in a while, I talk to an actual kid. It was really fun to chat with Aria, daughter of the cantor at my temple, about her favorite Jewish books in this August 2019 episode.
My name is Aria. I am 7 3/4. I'm the daughter of Cantor Sarah.
So I noticed that all of the books that you've talked about are historical books. Mm-hmm. None of them take place now.
Yeah.
So why do you like that?
I like them because I can learn how the past made the future.
What is it about today that you can see came from that history?
Well, in the Brave Girl book, that woman, she made more people have freedom.
So do you think that people are more free today because of what she did back then?
Yeah.
Why do you like to read so much?
Because in the real world, it is good, but sometimes you need to go to another world, and you can read a book and then you're transformed into another world, inside the book. That's why I like reading.
In my early years of podcasting, I focused on Jewish books, music, film, and web. By 2019, I had really narrowed it down to books, but when musician Craig Taubman performed a concert at my temple, I couldn't waste the opportunity to interview him. A great musician and such a mensch.
What is your own favorite of your own songs?
I would have to say right now, Yedid Nefesh. It's just, I don't know. Even now as I say it, I just get emotional. It just, there's something that I don't know. I didn't write it for, Yedid Nefesh is a love song from Shir HaShirim. I didn't write it for my wife. I didn't write it for my kids. It just came out and it just resonates with me.
And what does it mean?
I don't have a clue.
No, I mean translated.
Okay. Yedid Nefesh, my soulmate. Av Harachaman, compassionate one. Mishoch Avdara, I am drawn to you. I am attracted to you. I will do your bidding. You are my... You just do it for me. When I'm with you, you send me. So much so, there's actually a line in there, when I see you, I want to jump, leap towards you like a gazelle. I mean, come on. There's a tradition that says it was written symbolizing God's love for the people of Israel. It's like, all right, maybe, but I'm just hearing a few other things in there. Here's what I say about music. I don't know who told me this, but the voice is right in the middle between your head and your heart. And your heart doesn't speak and your mind doesn't speak, but your voice speaks. So I think music is just a centering force.
In Western Massachusetts, you can barely cross the street without tripping over a children's author. When I was up there, I was lucky to interview two of them, Jane Yolen and Barbara Diamond Golden, who had co-written Meet Me at the Well, The Girls and Women of the Bible. Even in this short clip from February 2019, you can sense the power of their storytelling.
I have, over the years, talked about the stories that make me uncomfortable in the Bible. One of them being the story of, Barbara's tired of hearing talk, the story of Yael.
I'm not tired, but I have heard it a bunch of times.
Which they always bring it up when we're doing a talk. When the Jews have actually overthrown the Canaanites, who were the fierce warriors with those chariots with scythes on their wheels, and Sisera, the head of the Canaanites, is running away, leaving his men, running away, comes to a little encampment between the Canaanites area and the Jews area. This little group of people were like the Switzerland, right? They didn't dare side with anyone, so they were the safe place for everyone. So he runs in, opens a tent, and goes in, and there's a woman standing there, and he says, "Woman," he says, "I'm tired. Bring me something to drink. I will lie down to sleep." She brings him something to drink. He lies down to sleep. She takes a tent peg. She puts it on his head and goes, bam, and kills him. And I go, what? Why did she kill him? I did some research in feminist books about the Bible. This is what we know about this community. A woman had to keep herself sacred and apart. So she was living in her own tent. Her husband would come and visit her. Her husband was the head of the community. And when Sisera comes in and he walks into her tent, uninvited, without a male escort from their people, he has already basically called her indecent. He also has said she was a bad host because she didn't immediately offer him something to drink or something to eat. Hosting was important. So in order to save herself and her husband, both of whom would have been thrown out of the community because she had dishonored herself and him, she had no other way of dealing with this but killing him.
Wow, that's quite a story.
Yeah, she's a good storyteller.
Yeah.
As a past chair of the Sidney Taylor Book Award Committee myself, I make a point of interviewing each year's chair about the new winners. In January 2018, that was especially fun because my friend Susan Kussell was the chair that year, and my friend Rich Michelson was one of the winners.
Sidney Taylor is the author of a series of books, beginning with All of a Kind Family. The awards today are actually sponsored by Sidney Taylor's daughter, Jo Taylor Marshall. So the winner of the younger category is a story called The Language of Angels, a story about the reinvention of Hebrew. It's by Richard Michelson, illustrated by Carla Gudian. Oh, I just love this book. It talks about why does everyone in Israel speak Hebrew as opposed to Yiddish or German or any number of languages that they could be speaking? Because originally people spoke Hebrew mainly, for prayers. So how did we get from that to a country where everyone is speaking Hebrew all the time? The wonderful folk illustrations match the story perfectly. This is a totally new topic that we have never seen in a picture book. It's very masterfully told. Richard Michelson has written several other Sidney Taylor books. He's written a Sidney Taylor winner before, and he actually won a Sidney Taylor honor book last year for a book called Fascinating about the life of Leonard Nimoy. And so he's just a very skilled writer. And the illustrator has been honored by Sidney Taylor Awards as well for HANUKKAH haiku. And so they just kind of came together here and delivered this beautiful package.
What did he say when you told him that Language of Angels was the gold medalist this year?
Well, actually, I messed with him a little bit. So he's located in Massachusetts, and our next conference is going to be in Boston. So we had already been talking to Richard Michelson, and we had been asking him, would he speak for this session or that session? And so I called him, and I said, Rich, I was wondering if I could ask you a favor. I know that we've asked you about some sessions for the AJL conference. I was wondering, do you mind doing one more? And he said, oh, yeah, sure, of course. What is it? And I said, would you give the winner speech for the Sidney Taylor Awards? Because you won the Sidney Taylor Award this year. And he was like, no, oh my God, really? You know, so that was really sweet. He was really thrilled that this book in particular won. This is only his second win of all the recognition he's gotten.
His second gold, yeah.
Awards. His second gold, and the first gold is...
as good as anybody.
Exactly. Were you on the committee that year,
No, I think that was after my time.
It's an amazing book. So this is his second win, and he said it just meant so much for this particular book because he felt that this book maybe wouldn't find an audience all on its own, and he felt that the awards would give it the extra boost. And then I also called his illustrator. It turns out Carla and Rich are friends, and both of them were so happy for the other one. Oh, I'm so happy for Rich. Oh, I'm so happy for Carla.
That's adorable.
It was so sweet. And Carla was actually at Grand Central Station selling her artwork as part of a festival. So she was on the phone with me having this, deep conversation about her book while she was serving customers. It was really, really quite a conversation.
Good kids' books about Israel are hard to find. It's true now, and it was true in June 2017, when I spoke to Tamar Stein about her historical middle-grade novel, The 6-Day Hero, which is, of course, about the 6-Day War.
I really went into it not knowing all that much about it. I knew the 6-Day War lasted 6 days, right? How bad could it be? And it was really as I started learning about it, and I realized that the story really starts the month before the 6-Day War. And that month leading up to the war was a time of true fear and intense tension in Israel. People really believed that it's possible that the end of their country was about to occur. The Holocaust had ended, barely 2 decades before that. That was not an idle threat. That was not an idle nightmare. It felt very real to them. It had happened before, and it felt like maybe it was going to happen again. And then, of course, it didn't, and they were incredibly victorious so quickly and decisively, but it certainly wasn't a given heading into it. I really wrote this book because I was very troubled that publishers and authors were not writing about Israel for children. I think that the entire topic of Israel has become very fraught, and people feel really strong feelings about it. And that's okay, but I think it's not okay not to talk about it at all. That creates a vacuum for bad things to happen. And so I do feel very passionate that it's really important to set a historically accurate story out there to inform children about what happened.
Leslia Newman is a repeat guest on the Book of Life because she keeps on writing great Jewish picture books. She is also a huge cat lover, and those two interests combined in the very unusual true story of Quetzal the cat who composed. I had to include this clip from late November 2016 so that you could hear Quetzal's composition.
It's based on a true story. Quetzal was owned by a composer named Moshe Kotel, or maybe Moshe Kotel was owned by Quetzal. And he was a composer. And one day, Quetzal ran down his keyboard for no apparent reason. And he wrote down what he heard and sent it to a contest. And Quetzal's composition won an honorable mention. Quetzal became world famous, and Quetzal's composition was played all over the world. The way I found out about this story actually is from a column that my rabbi wrote in our synagogue's newsletter, where he talked about Mr. Kotel's kavanah, that he was open to the surprising moments of beauty in everyday life and paid attention to them. And so to me, that concept is all through this book, and it's a very Jewish concept.
On November 9th, 2016, the day after the presidential election, it felt right to post an episode called I Dissent. It was an interview with Debbie Levy about her picture book biography of the notorious RBG called I Dissent, Ruth Bader Ginsburg Makes Her Mark. It was also very cool to be able to include a song by Jonathan Mann based on Justice Ginsburg's dissent in the Hobby Lobby case. Listen to this.
Whoa, now the court, I fear, has ventured into a minefield full of slut-shaming geezers and religious extremism. Oh, but one thing's clear, the fight isn't over. We gotta stand together for what we know is right.
She became a cult figure because she speaks up. She's not a yeller. She's not a screamer. She doesn't make things personal. One of her close friends was Antonin Scalia, and two people on the Supreme Court could not have disagreed more on legal issues and probably on policy issues as well. But they heard each other. They exchanged ideas, did the work that they needed to do, and then, their families went on vacations together, had holidays together. So there's much to admire about her for her outspokenness and also for the way she is outspoken, which is in a respectful way. There's a scene in the book when she's a child and she and her family go on a car vacation and they come across a sign outside of a hotel that says, "No dogs or Jews allowed." Years later, at her confirmation hearings, after she was nominated to the Supreme Court, she brought this up as a way of saying, I've been thinking about discrimination, bigotry, my whole life. And then she has also said that her Jewish heritage has continued to make her very aware of issues of discrimination, of fair treatment, and also, I think, of reasoning your way toward a conclusion, which is, a very Jewish approach to problems.
Geef mir die nisslachen Cracker Jack. Will ich gehen rufen, doch keiner weg, weil man schreit. Wie wat war die Spiel? Es ist a Schande, als man verspielt. Weil es ist 1, 2, 3 Streiks bis heute in der Baseball-Game.
It's intense listening to one short little clip after another, right? If you need an intermission, here is a sort of 7th inning stretch for you. Enjoy this Yiddish version of Take Me Out to the Ball Game that was featured in the May 2007 episode of the podcast called The Book of Life Plays Ball. house, there's a small movie theater that caters to the many Jewish retirees in my neighborhood, with documentaries like Welcome to Kutcher's, The Last Catskills Resort. Filmmaker Ian Rosenberg was there for the film's opening, and the movie theater manager kindly lent us her office so we could do this interview that appeared on the podcast in June 2015.
I think besides the fascinating hidden histories of sports at the Catskills, particularly Kutcher's with Wilt Chamberlain being a bellhop, and the rise of Jewish American comedy through people like Seinfeld and Sid Caesar and Freddie Roman, to me, the Catskills experience is really the Jewish American experience in a microcosm. It was created out of anti-Semitism. Jews weren't welcome. No Hebrews or nor consumptives were written on many of the advertisements for hotels in the area. They were restricted. This was an immigrant population. It used to be only the very, very affluent would be able to have a vacation. So you have both anti-Semitism and sort of the new rise of the American idea of a vacation. And then as it developed in the heydays in the 50s and 60s and 70s, you have the beginnings of assimilation where Jews are successful and cosmopolitan and really the breeding ground for much of American entertainment culture, and a group of people who wanted to be together but in a cosmopolitan American experience, kosher but with international sort of style and glamour. And then as the Jewish Americans became so assimilated, and with the rise of air conditioning and air travel, that they could go anywhere they want, or they had permanent vacations in Florida and LA, that led to the inevitable decline of the Catskills resorts. So I really think that you're not only looking at pop culture, you're looking at the history of the Jewish people through the lens of this over 100-year-old family business.
I used to really love going to Book Expo America, the American Booksellers Association convention, where I would wander the bustling show floor and interview anybody I could find who had something to say about Jewish books. Here's an episode from September 2014, when I spoke to author Jacqueline Jules and illustrator Durga Yael Bernhard about their historical Sephardic picture book, Never Say a Mean Word Again.
I first saw this story in the Hertz Humash, this legend of Samuel HaNagid, and I said, this is just such an amazing story. I have to find a way to tell it for children. It's a story of two adults, and I had to translate it into a story between two children and also take out some of the scarier parts. And I worked on it for over a dozen years before I got it right. And then I sold it to Wisdom Tales, and this amazing artist did this incredible design for this book, and maybe you can give us some more background on how you did that.
I've long wanted to do a book about the Jewish population in medieval Spain. It seems that it's a big hole in the educational curriculum, especially in the secular school system. Many people don't even know that there was ever such a thing as a Spanish Jew and don't know what the word Sephardic really means. The medieval iconography and art and history is just an illustrator's garden of delight. There's no end to it. I had enough material to illustrate a book 10 times as long, and it was a matter of process of elimination to decide on which designs to use and really let the story dictate. But there was a lot of weeding to be done in order to make the book clean.
And I can add to that in terms of the richness of the medieval time. I read the Tales of Alhambra. I did just a lot of research into that time period and the feel of it. It's just amazing. Yes. And the stories are so rich. And you just captured all of it. I was just very excited.
Shmuel HaNagid actually was responsible for a lot of that richness. He did a great deal to support the Jewish tradition in Spain. He did a great deal to support scholars and poets and artists, and he founded a yeshiva, and he was a phenomenal person. When he died, everything went downhill.
Now and then, I cover books for adults, which in the case of Maggie Anton's work is a pleasure because she infuses her Jewish historical fiction with romance and magic. Here she is in October 2013, talking about Rav Hizda's Daughter, Book 1, Apprentice, a novel of love, the Talmud, and sorcery.
I was looking for sources of authentic Jewish women's names from Babylonia. and I discovered Babylonian incantation bowls, which are regular pottery bowls created between 4th and 6th century in Babylonia in the exact places where the Talmud was being written. They're clearly written by Jews. They call upon Jewish angels, Adonai Sevaot. They quote Torah. Some of them even quote Mishnah. And these are magic spells written on the inside of bowls, which were buried under people's houses to protect them from demons, from the evil eye, from all kinds of illnesses and nasty stuff. I found out Rav Hizda cast spells. I found out that his daughter knows how to protect her husband from demons in the privy.
Demons in the privy.
Yes, that's Shaviti is actually the, and you could ask me how you protect yourself, because that's actually interesting.
How do you protect yourself in the privy, and why are there demons in the privy?
Oh, because demons like to live in nasty, disgusting places, and so it doesn't get more, these are outhouses, privies. And actually, the magical procedure to protect yourself from demons in the privy is you come out and you wash your hands 3 times, the Talmud tells us. Because heaven forbid you should not do this, and you touch your eye, well, the demons will get in your eye, next thing you know, you're going to go blind. If you touch your nose, they're going to have all kinds of respiratory stuff. Worst of all, if you should not wash your hands and touch your mouth, you will have every kind of intestinal disease like they didn't even have in Egypt. And of course, does that work? Of course it works.
Here's a clip from May 2012. Mark Tyler Nobleman visited a local temple to give a talk about his picture book biography, Boys of Steel, which is about the Jewish creators of Superman. I went to the talk, and then I snagged an interview. This is not an explicitly Jewish book, but Jerry and Joe were Jewish, the creators of Superman, and this book was named a notable book by the Association of Jewish Libraries back when it came out. So, other than Jewish pride, and, we always like to say, oh, these famous people were members of the tribe. Besides that, is it significant that Jerry and Joe were Jewish? And is Superman Jewish in some way?
Good questions. Not the first time I've talked about this, but the reason that I do get invited to speak in synagogues and JCCs is because, yes, the book is not explicitly Jewish. In fact, it doesn't mention their Judaism at all in the story proper. I just show Shabbat candles in one scene. But in the afterword, I address 2 or 3 things about their Judaism which I feel are significant. One is Superman's Kryptonian name, which is Kal-El, which in Hebrew can be translated to mean all that is God. And it's just funny to speculate about the consciousness of that. Did they know what that meant, or were they just lifting this sound from their Sunday school or their Hebrew school days and using it, not really thinking about the meaning? We don't know, because they never said. And then I mentioned the Shabbat candles and the little anecdote that Joe would draw on his mother's breadboard. That's what his surface was in their little apartment, and so he couldn't use it on Thursday nights because she needed it to make the challah. That was the one night he couldn't draw. And then what I thought was most significant was another myth that was debunked. That's about Hitler. There's a reoccurring story in Superman academia, if you call it that Hitler banned Superman personally on the floor of the Reichstag. So it turned out to be sort of apocrypha. No one knew exactly where this came from. And through another person that had already done some research on this, I pieced together, I agree with his theory, that there was a series of smaller incidents that might have led someone to eventually exaggerate and say Hitler banned Superman, when in fact it was really just a fairly small thing, which was a Nazi newspaper that wrote a disparaging article about Jerry Siegel, basically just the fact that he was Jewish. So these are the 3 or 4 Jewish elements that the book does address, even though most of them are in the afterword. But it's enough to, I think, create interest in the Jewish community beyond what you said, that, okay, here are people that created something that are Jewish, and does the Jewishness inform their work or not? And, in this case, I'm very honest with groups when I say, we don't know. I can't say for sure. I've had some audiences where 1 or 2 people get indignant that they say, how could you not say that it was a Jewish influence? Look what you're telling us. And I say, I'm not saying it's not. I just can't say for sure that it is. Mm-hmm. As far as was Superman Jewish, there are articles that say Superman is a Christ figure, but then there are also articles that say Superman is a Moses figure. I think when you get as iconic as Superman, there's going to be both sides of it. Tom Sawyer and all, Harry Potter, all these big fictional characters, when they become so iconic, you can pretty much relate them to anything.
In this clip from April 2011, author Leslie Simpson shares her picture book, Yuvi's Candy Tree, based on the true life story of Ethiopian Israeli Yuvi Tashomi.
Yuvi Tashomi had been one of the children during Operation Moses. I asked Yuvi what she remembered about that experience. And she started to tell me the story in a way that made me feel as if I had entered into another place and another time. She could remember being afraid of the sound of the hyena, and she remembered waving to the moon and the stars. She remembered the constant thirst. And so my goal in writing the book was really to capture the soul of her voice and the spirit of her experience. I felt as if she had given me a gift, which was her story, the story of a 5-year-old girl who escapes from Ethiopia on a donkey with her grandmother, and her journey as she makes it to a Sudanese refugee camp and is later airlifted to Israel. Yuvi Tashomi told me later, when I actually launched the book in Israel, that for her as a kid, being part of this exodus was an empowering experience because she and her grandmother and her family, they didn't wait to be rescued. They walked. That's really quite a remarkable achievement.
Here's a clip from June 2010 about When the Hurricane Came to New Orleans by Nechama Lislevinson, recorded after it won the Sidney Taylor Manuscript Award, but before it was published and named a National Jewish Book Award finalist.
All right, we're in a cab, so if there's background noise, that's our excuse. Okay. So, Aileen Grossberg, chair of the Sidney Taylor Manuscript Committee, tell us, first of all, about the committee and what's the difference between your committee and the Sidney Taylor Book Award Committee.
Okay. Our committee comes first. And literally it comes first because we look at unpublished manuscripts for ages 8 to 11, chapter books, fiction.
The reason it's so specific is that this is Sidney Taylor legacy and you're sort of emulating
exactly.
All of a Kind Family.
All of a Kind Family was basically aimed at that age range.
And because of the history of how the All of a Kind Family books were discovered through a publishing contest when they were unpublished manuscripts.
Exactly. So this kind of emulates the Sidney Taylor discovery process.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about the winner.
The book is called When the Hurricane Came to New Orleans, and it's a contemporary novel featuring a young girl, Gertie, who lives in New Orleans with her family, and they evacuate, as hundreds and thousands of people did, as the hurricane came. They went to live with her relatives for an entire year, and Gertie goes through a lot of emotional torment and displacement as she adjusts to life in another place. But it's not just a story of Hurricane Katrina, it's also a story infused with Jewish values of family and tikkun olam and realization of what is really important. Mm-hmm. And it's not all the stuff that she left behind in New Orleans.
Right. Wow, well that's totally contemporary.
I think one of the reasons that we liked it was because there aren't a whole lot of books in that age range with Jewish values that deal with contemporary events. They may deal with growing up, in the 2000s, but to set it in an actual contemporary event is what makes this book stand out.
Okay. That's interesting, too, because right now it's so contemporary, and eventually that'll make it a historical novel.
That's right.
If it stands the test of time,
yes,
it'll become a historical novel.
We hope it actually will get into print.
Uh-huh. All right, great. Thank you so much, Aileen.
Oh, you're welcome. And it's been nice sharing camp with you.
My friend Anne Dublin sometimes acts as the Book of Life's Canadian correspondent. Here's a clip from February 2010, when Anne visited Kaplansky's Deli in Toronto for the book launch of Save the Deli, In Search of Perfect Pastrami, Crusty Rye, and the Heart of Jewish Delicatessen by David Sachs.
I'm sitting at a table in Kaplansky's Deli in downtown Toronto. In the background, you can hear customers placing their orders, munching on their sandwiches, and sighing with satisfaction when they're finished. I've come to talk to David Sachs, the author of a book called Save the Deli. David is a Toronto native who's a deli fanatic. His idea of perfect happiness is tucking into a pastrami on rye with a pickle on the side. Well, David, so what started you on the road to writing Save the Deli?
When I was studying at McGill University, I decided to write a paper with a friend on the sociology of the Jewish delicatessen, and as part of that, we discovered that the delis were in fact disappearing, that there were once greater numbers of them, and they've been declining not just in Montreal, but in Toronto and in other cities, and that really got me motivated to write this book. And the book is really a look deep inside the Jewish delicatessen business. It takes you behind the counter, standing shoulder to shoulder with the counterman at Katz's, slicing pastrami, how delis have evolved, why they're in the state they are today, and what we can sort of look forward to in the future.
So the book is really a book of social history.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a look into an edible culture, is what I like to say.
Back in 2009, we were all very excited about this newfangled social media thing that was supposed to bring the world together. At the Association of Jewish Libraries conference in Chicago, I recorded a mini-series called Why Be Social to try to help my colleagues understand the phenomenon. It appeared on the podcast in August of 2009. Here's a bit from Part 2, out of the 4-part series, in which attendees try to define the hip new words blog and podcast.
My name is Sylvia Fershine.
Sylvia, what is a blog?
What I think is that it's somebody writing. It's their own site, their website, for themselves to speak about anything they want to speak about.
Good answer.
Yeah.
Okay. And bonus question, what is a podcast?
A podcast? I'm trying to figure that one out. I know you have one, Heidi.
Right.
And I've looked at it. You interview people, and you can hear them. We can't see them, though.
Right.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, good answer.
It's a good answer?
Yes.
I get A?
Yes, you get an A.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for playing.
Hi, I'm Irene Seff.
Irene, what is a blog?
The dictionary definition of a blog, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, is a mass...
the Oxford English Dictionary?
Oh, no, only B through Z.
Oh, okay.
A's I was bored with. They're just not authentic. They're just not effective. They're just not all-encompassing for me. So blog is a perfect place to start.
Okay.
And the blog is a mass with tentacles. And it's actually usually subterranean, mole-like in its actually distribution of its molecules. So that's what a blog is.
Oh, thank you. I like your answer.
Okay.
Okay, bonus question.
Oh, I'm glad I get a bonus because that's B. I can handle that.
That's right, B for bonus. What is a podcast?
Well, a podcast is a Heidi creation to get the AJL members to talk to each other. She does a great, great job, and we're so delighted that she is part of the Association of Jewish Libraries.
Good answer. And you are quick on your feet.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks, Heidi. Have a good day.
Rich Michelson.
Rich, what is a blog?
It's kind of like a public diary. The good blogs talk about what goes on within your profession, and it's a conversation between people within a field or like-minded interests. That's what a good blog is.
What's a bad blog?
A bad blog is when people just tell you what they ate for lunch, dinner, and when they're going to the store.
Okay, bonus question. What is a podcast?
A podcast is when you go to your computer and you go onto Book of Life and you scroll through and you look for Michelson.
That's right.
And you hear a podcast is like a radio show on the web, but you can access it at any time, so you don't have to be home. and you don't have to worry about your schedule. You just click on, and it's, I mean, the easiest thing. It's a good radio show.
Pulitzer Prize-winning author Geraldine Brooks was as sweet as she could be when I talked to her in April 2008 about her fictional history of the Sarajevo Haggadah called People of the Book.
You know, I didn't see books exactly as inanimate. For me, books are alive, and, you know, they're what defines us as human beings. So I guess it's not so much an object in particular as this one. Why is this one so lavishly illuminated at a time when most Hebrew thought was against illustration of any kind? Who is the African woman that's depicted in one of the illuminations in the Haggadah, enjoying the Seder meal with a medieval Jewish family? Just so many questions, and we can't answer them through research. So the only thing left is to answer them by trying to have an imaginative engagement with the past.
In all the long history that you've invented for this Haggadah, you never show it being used at a Passover Seder. Why is that?
I know. And when somebody pointed that out to me, I just kind of slapped my forehead and said, "Oi." And now I wish I could go back and write that section where everybody would be living in peace, because there were, of course, hundreds of years where Jews did manage to live in peace without trauma and disaster. And as soon as I had the thought, I thought I could tell exactly how to write it and what would be the way into it, because in the actual Sarajevo Haggadah, there's one page where a child has scribbled all over the parchment, practicing letters. And I thought that would have been the perfect introduction into that section where the parent comes in, sees the kid desecrating the wonderful book, hits him upside the head, you know, and then you see just domestic Jewish life taking its course and preparations for a Seder, and it would have been a great thing to have included. So I was just, I guess, so fixated on the drama that I didn't see that opportunity.
The Book Thief was a young adult novel by Australian author Marcus Zusak that was so good it forced the Sydney Taylor Book Award Committee to create a YA category just so we could give it a medal. I was thrilled to get to introduce Marcus when he gave a talk at the independent bookstore Books and Books in Coral Gables, Florida, and I got to record him for my December 2007 episode.
And then I had the main character, Liesl, tell the story herself. The problem then was, after 100 pages, I worked out that now I had the most Australian-sounding German girl. And so that didn't work. So then I went to third-person narration, where I was telling the story, and I thought, this is what I was trying to avoid all along. Another, hopefully, well-written book set during Nazi Germany that's been done 1,000 times. Then I was sitting on the back step, and all of a sudden I thought, what if death, rather than being all-powerful, what if death was afraid of humans? What if death was haunted by us and everything we do? And then I thought, not only is it a surprise that death would be like that, but it also makes sense. If something can be unexpected and make sense at the same time, I thought this is the breakthrough. And so I thought it did make sense, because death is on hand to see all of our biggest miseries, all of the terrible things we do to each other. And I thought he's trying to tell this story to prove to himself that humans are actually worthwhile.
Jo Taylor Marshall is the daughter of author Sydney Taylor and the sponsor of the Sydney Taylor Book Awards. Her mother's classic all-of-a-kind family series was based on her real family. What a treat to hear Jo sharing that history in this clip from October 2007.
Tell us a little bit more about the stories.
Well, they're all true. Mama hiding the buttons so that they would dust Time Henny got lost on the beach and ended up in the police and didn't want to leave because she was being treated so well. Ella's dating of the young man. I'm sure she took some poetic license and embellished them, but I think that's part of the charm of the book, that they are so real. I love the stories about Henny because Henny was Henny to the very end. She was funky, she was mischievous, she was difficult. Somehow I could see her as she was growing up, knowing her much later in life and saying, my God, this is the same little girl who's rebellious. She was spunky.
Did you know Woody Guthrie, the famous activist folk singer, was married into a Jewish family? It was so much fun to talk with his daughter, Nora Guthrie, in December 2006 about his Jewish songs, recorded posthumously by the Klezmatics.
How many nights for Hanukkah? Happy, joyous Hanukkah. Nights and days, days and nights. Happy, joyous Hanukkah. 8 of the nights of Hanukkah. Happy, joyous Hanukkah. 8 of the days and 8 of the nights. Happy, joyous Hanukkah.
Well, I contacted the Klezmatics a couple of years ago because I had a pile of these funny Hanukkah songs that Woody had written through the eyes of someone who wasn't Jewish. And, it just has a unique Woody perspective. I just thought they would be the perfect band to incorporate understanding of who Woody was at this time in New York when he was living here in the 1940s and 50s. And it was really important to me that there be a band that had this kind of multicultural experience, so they were just a perfect match.
One for Moses on the Mount, happy, joyous Hanukkah.
We did a concert of the Hanukkah songs about 2 years ago before we ever did a recording of them. Did the 92nd Y in Manhattan, and actually Arlo was a part of that too because we loved our Bubby. On a personal note, the fact that this takes us back and reminds us and we dream of and we remember our Bubby is probably the unspoken reason why we're doing all this, because we had such a great relationship, my father and my grandmother, my mother, coming from such different cultures, one from Oklahoma Protestant and then this Russian Jewish immigrant. So for us, it's kind of this wonderful blending of our personal memories as well. And that's how the project really started.
Here is an early example of an author bursting into song. Author-illustrator Sims Tabak, talking about his classic picture book, Joseph Had a Little Overcoat, sang the Yiddish folk song that the story is based on, in this clip from August 2006.
The book was such a personal book for me because it was based on a song that I had heard when I was a very young child.
Can you sing a little bit of the song it's based on?
Oh, yeah, I could sing it. Hab ich mir am Mantel von Zeit in Schlaf, la 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 la. Hab ich nicht in sich kein ganzen Stoch, la 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 la. Darum hab ich mir betracht und von dem Mantel a Rätsel gemacht. La 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 la. Von dem Mantel a Rätsel gemacht. Well, that's just the first stanza, where he has a coat, which is a mantle, and then he turns it into a jacket, which is a rekel.
And here we are, back to the very beginning. In the first ever episode of The Book of Life, in December 2005, author Eric Kimmel shared his overwhelmingly popular classic picture book, Herschel and the Hanukkah Goblins.
Well, the thing that interests people most about Herschel and the Hanukkah Goblin, the story comes almost entirely from non-Jewish sources. The real inspiration was Dickens' A Christmas Carol.
Really?
Because in A Christmas Carol, Dickens really does an amazing thing. He takes a religious holiday and he creates an entirely inclusive story. The closest you get to any kind of religious sentiment is Tiny Tim saying, "God bless us, everyone." So everything that is positive about the holiday is there, but none of the religious trappings are. So I thought it might be fun to try that idea as a Hanukkah story that would really be fun for everybody. And really all you need to know are the usual stuff, dreidels, menorah, and the thing about it that I've been very pleased about is that kids everywhere love this story. I get letters from kids in places where there isn't a Jewish family for 100 miles who say that's their favorite story. They prefer that to the usual Christmas stories.
Back to the future. We bookend 2005 and 2025 on the Book of Life podcast with Jewish stories based on A Christmas Carol, which is in itself a time travel story. To take us home, here's Jean Meltzer, author of The 8 Heartbreaks of Hanukkah, in November 2025. It's funny, as we record this episode for the 20th anniversary of the Book of Life podcast, in the very first episode in December 2005, I interviewed Eric Kimmel about his classic picture book, Herschel and the Hanukkah Goblins.
So good.
And he said, yeah, I know, it's so good.
It's so good.
And he said he was inspired by A Christmas Carol to create a holiday story that wasn't very religious and was mildly spooky.
I love that. Let me also just say about Herschel and the Hanukkah Goblins is I have been asked if I will have any interest in writing a children's book, and I am terrified to do it because I feel like it will never be as good as that children's book. Like I feel like that is the gold standard of Jewish children's books. If I can't write anything to that level, I won't even try. So that's amazing. I love being the bookend to that. I really want to commend you. 20 years of doing this. That is wild. I mean, that is a commitment to your listeners. Thank you for being someone who supports Jewish creatives with your own time and effort.
Thank you so much. That's beautiful. I appreciate your appreciation.
Send a nice email. Say you're a listener, right? That's a great thing you can do because a lot of times we do it in vacuums or we don't get feedback. I think you'll find if you spread joy, you will feel it in return tenfold.
I hope you've enjoyed this trip down memory lane with me. If you'd like to hear the episodes these clips were pulled from, they are all still available at bookoflifepodcast.com or in your podcast app. I'll be back with you in January 2026 to kick off my 21st year with an episode about the newest crop of Sidney Taylor Book Award winners. Until then, happy Hanukkah and happy reading. Say hi to Heidi at 561-206-2473 or bookoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Subscribe to my newsletter on Substack to join me in growing Jewish joy and shrinking anti-Semitic hate. Get show notes, transcripts, Jewish Kidlit news, and occasional calls to action right in your inbox. Sign up for the newsletter at bookoflifepodcast.substack.com. You can also find the Book of Life on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Want to read the books featured on the show? Buy them through bookshop.org/shop/Book of Life to support the podcast and independent bookstores at the same time. You can also help us out by becoming a monthly supporter through Patreon or making a one-time donation to our home library, the Feldman Children's Library at Congregation B'nai Israel of Boca Raton, Florida. You'll find links for all of that and more at bookoflifepodcast.com. Additional support comes from the Association of Jewish Libraries, the leading authority on Judaic librarianship, which also sponsors our sister podcast, Nice Jewish Books, a show about Jewish fiction for adults. Learn more about AJL at jewishlibraries.org. Our background music is provided by the Freilach Makers Klezmer String Band. Thanks for listening, and happy reading.